What if the most powerful force in the universe was never in a distant sky or hidden in the pages of a holy book? What if humanity had spent thousands of years searching for it in the wrong place? Because according to one of the most shocking conclusions of Jacobo Grinberg, what we call God could be much closer than anyone imagines. After years of research exploring the human mind in laboratories, studying ancient traditions, living with shamans, and analyzing phenomena that defy conventional explanations, Jacobo Grinberg came to a conclusion capable of overturning many of the beliefs that most people accept without question. And the deeper he delved into it, the more evident it became. Think about it for a moment. Humanity has spent thousands of years building temples, writing doctrines, defending absolute truths, and living in fear of divine judgment. But there is an uncomfortable question. What if all of that was just a distraction? And what if millions of people had been looking in the wrong direction, while what was truly sacred remained hidden in plain sight? What you're about to hear doesn't come solely from philosophical speculation. It arises from the convergence of research, experiences, and expanded states of consciousness, and knowledge passed down through generations. And it has the potential to call into question ideas that many consider untouchable, because some truths don't add information. They completely change the way we interpret reality. Wait, don't move forward yet. Don't look at the phone. Don't open another tab. Don't think about what you'll do after this video. Just observe the next thought that comes up in your mind. Observe it. And now ask yourself, if you can observe your thoughts, who is the one observing? That same question obsessed Jacobo Grinberg for years. And the answer led him to a conclusion that challenges almost everything we've been taught about consciousness and about God. If that question just awakened something inside you, write it in the comments. I am the observer, because what you're about to discover starts right there. From the moment human consciousness appeared, humans have tried to explain what seemed impossible to describe. He tried to name the infinite, to give shape to what is formless, to confine the unlimited within words, concepts, and mental structures. And maybe that's where the confusion began. Over time, the divine stopped being perceived as a living experience and turned into an external figure, into a cosmic judge, into a supreme authority that observes, evaluates, and records every mistake made. Or even worse, into something that can only be accessed through intermediaries, as if the universe had created a bureaucratic system for contacting the sacred. Jacobo Grinberg was perfectly familiar with that view. He grew up surrounded by it. He studied it. He questioned it. He analyzed it from different angles. But the more he advanced in his research on consciousness, the closer he came to a conclusion that challenges the foundations of much of traditional religious thought. God would not be a separate entity. God would be a frequency. And if everything that exists is made up of vibration, then spirituality stops being an outward search. It becomes a matter of inner tuning. More than 2,000 years ago, Lao Tse expressed this idea with disarming simplicity. The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao, a brief yet devastating phrase. Because every time something infinite is reduced to a definition, it ceases to be infinite. Every time the absolute is confined within an idea, that idea becomes too small to contain it. And from this perspective, there lies one of the deepest mistakes in human history. The ancient Hermetists already hinted at this millennia ago. Their fundamental principles stated something extraordinary. All is mind. The universe is mental, not as a metaphor, not as a poetic image, but as a description of the very nature of reality. What's fascinating is that certain lines of modern research seem to be getting closer and closer to that possibility. Some scientists have proposed that perceived reality does not constitute an objective representation of the world. It would be more like an interface, a functional construct created by the brain to interact with the environment and ensure survival, not necessarily to reveal the truth. Imagine a video game of infinite complexity. The landscapes, the characters, and every visible element seem real to those inside, but none of them make up the true structure of the system. They are all representations. The true reality lies behind, in the code that supports the entire experience. From this perspective, God wouldn't be a character inside the game. He would be the intelligence that makes the game possible, the consciousness that sustains every scenario, every form, and every experience. However, for centuries, humanity has argued about superficial details regarding the divine, without stopping to observe that which sustains all existence. Something similar to eternally debating the design of the characters without asking who created the program. And if reality is an interface built by consciousness, then the separation between human beings and the divine could be one of the most convincing illusions ever experienced. Nikola Tesla seemed to sense something similar. For him, anyone who wanted to understand the deepest secrets of the universe had to learn to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that's precisely where one of the most important keys lies. The Hermetic principle expresses it with absolute clarity. Nothing remains still. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. Everything is constantly changing. If that's true, then the divine can't be something distant, static, or separate from existence. It's present in everything. In matter, in energy, in the air, in thoughts, in every experience that passes through human consciousness. And this is where something amazing happens. For the first time, the intuitions of mystics and some observations from science seem to be drawing closer together. Eastern traditions speak of Brahman as a universal consciousness where all separation disappears, a reality in which the individual and the whole cease to be separate things. On the other hand, certain experiments in modern physics have raised profound questions about the role the observer plays in the construction of reality. Questions that continue to generate debate even among the most rational minds because they suggest something unsettling. That consciousness not only observes the world, but actively participates in it. And if reality changes depending on how it is observed, then what about the connection with the divine? It wouldn't depend on distance. It would depend on frequency, on tuning, on the quality of consciousness from which each human being perceives existence. And if that were true, then the most important question would no longer be where to find God. The real question would be, what frequency is your mind living on at this very moment? For years, one idea especially caught the attention within certain circles dedicated to the study of consciousness. It was developed by the psychiatrist David Hawkins and sparked intense debates among researchers, therapists, and spiritual seekers all over the world. This is the so-called scale of consciousness, a model that tries to relate different emotional states to specific levels of vibration. At the lowest part, emotions like shame, guilt, or fear appear. Mental states that consume energy, reduce clarity, and limit perception. At the higher levels, love, joy, inner peace, and states of expanded consciousness appear. And although many people debate the details of this theory, the question it raises is fascinating. If emotions represent different frequencies of experience, What happens when a person spends most of their life vibrating in fear? What happens when guilt, anxiety, or the feeling of inadequacy becomes their usual state? The answer leads to an uncomfortable reflection. The more a mind is trapped in heavy emotions, the harder it becomes to perceive deeper dimensions of reality. And here arises a question that Jacobo Grinberg considered worthy of analysis. Who benefits when millions of people remain trapped in constant states of fear, dependence, and insecurity? Because if you look closely, much of the modern structure seems to feed precisely on those emotions. Visible chains are not needed to limit a population. It's enough to keep their attention hijacked. It's enough to convince them that they're small, that they lack power, that they always need to depend on something external. For centuries, many people were taught that the sacred was far from them, that they had to earn access, that they were imperfect by nature, that they needed intermediaries to get closer to the truth. Then new forms of conditioning arrived. Screens, alarming headlines, constant crises, information designed to capture attention through emotional impact. Because fear has a very useful characteristic. It hijacks consciousness. When the nervous system remains in survival mode, the mind narrows, becomes reactive, impulsive, predictable. And a mind trapped in reaction can hardly explore deeper levels of understanding. Added to that is another powerful force: the constant feeling of scarcity, the pressure to keep running without stopping, to produce more, to get more, to chase something that always seems to be one step ahead. Like a hamster running on a wheel that promises freedom right after the next turn, and then the next, and then the next. In that state, your attention is completely absorbed by survival. And when all your energy is focused on lack, it becomes difficult to recognize any form of inner abundance. From this perspective, the real prison wouldn't be physical, it would be psychological. A prison built with mental habits, repeated emotions, and deeply rooted beliefs. The most surprising thing is that the bars wouldn't even be visible because they'd be made of thoughts. And the keys to that prison would also remain inside your own mind. The psychologist Leon Festinger discovered something extraordinary while studying cognitive dissonance. When an idea threatens a deeply held belief, many people prefer to reject the information rather than endure the discomfort of questioning what they have always considered true. It's a powerful defense mechanism. The mind protects its familiar structures, even when those very structures limit its growth. That's why change is so difficult. Not because the truth is complicated, but because letting go of an old identity is often painful. Neville Goddard took this line of thought even further. His proposal was radical. Imagination would not be a simple mental capacity. It would be a direct expression of creative power. From that perspective, the mind ceases to be a passive spectator of reality. It becomes a force capable of actively participating in its construction. And if everything works through vibration, energy, and frequency, then thoughts that are held consistently become extremely important. But there is a condition: the mind needs to be trained. Because a consciousness dominated by fear, doubt, and scarcity ends up reproducing exactly what it tries to escape from. And here we find one of the most challenging teachings of the entire spiritual path. Transformation is not about accumulating more information. It's not about collecting new theories, concepts, or beliefs. It's about letting go. Unlearning, in removing layers, in questioning what was automatically accepted for years. True mental freedom arises when what is unnecessary disappears. But how can we achieve it in a time when noise seems to follow us everywhere? How can we listen to something deep when every minute is competing for our attention? The answer that almost all spiritual traditions have found is surprisingly similar. Silence, not external silence. An internal silence. A space where thoughts stop fighting for prominence. A state where the mind stops running after answers. Mystics from different cultures came to the same discovery time and again. What words seek often appears when words come to a stop. What the mind tries to understand can reveal itself when the mind stops interfering. And interestingly, certain modern research seems to point in the same direction. When studying experienced meditators, some scientists observed significant changes in brain regions related to the perception of space, time, and individual identity. During deep states of meditation, the usual sense of separation diminishes. The boundaries between the observer and the observed begin to blur, and many people describe an extraordinary experience, the feeling of being part of something immensely greater than themselves. That's why, according to this view, the first step is to learn to inhabit the void, the space between one thought and another, the pause that usually goes unnoticed, because that is where the old mental structures lose their strength. That is where rigid identity begins to loosen, and that is where a completely new perception can emerge. But there is a second key that appears repeatedly in different traditions around the world. The power of sound, vibration, sacred geometry. In Hinduism, the mantra Om is considered the primordial vibration of existence, the original frequency from which all creation emerges. And when certain ancient teachings state that in the beginning was the Word, that phrase begins to take on a completely different meaning. Because maybe they weren't just talking about words. Maybe they were talking about vibration, about frequency, about the primordial sound that sustains reality itself. And what if what the ancient traditions called the Word was never actually a word? What if they actually meant the first vibration of creation? This idea gains strength when we look at cymatics experiments, the discipline that studies how sound influences matter. The results are surprising. Certain frequencies organize particles into precise and harmonious geometric patterns. Others generate chaotic and unstable shapes. The question is inevitable. If vibration can reorganize matter, what happens when a person spends years vibrating in fear, guilt, or gratitude? From this perspective, emotions not only change how a person feels, they also influence how they perceive and construct their reality. And here comes another fascinating discovery. Some research suggests that the heart plays a much more important role than traditionally believed. When a person experiences gratitude, appreciation, or genuine love, they enter a state known as cardiac coherence, a state of deep internal synchronization. For those who study consciousness, this has a powerful implication. If God is frequency, and the heart is one of the main resonance centers of the human being, then the connection with the divine does not depend on supplication. It depends on tuning. He who feels separated asks. He who feels connected begins to emit. It's like an antenna. If it's full of interference, it only picks up noise. If it finds the right frequency, the signal comes through clearly. But a practical question arises. How do you change that frequency? The ancient masters proposed 3 simple questions. The first one, is this really happening or does it only exist in the mind? Because a large part of human suffering comes from imaginary scenarios that never actually happen. The second one, does this strengthen my coherence or destroy it? Every thought, conversation, or content you consume feeds a certain frequency. And the third one, Who would this person be without the story they tell about themselves, without the labels, without the old tales of failure, guilt, or limitation? Because many times the biggest obstacle is not reality, it's the identity that has been built around it. At this point, the teaching becomes clear. The first key is to understand that the divine is not separate from existence. The second is to cultivate heart coherence through gratitude and love. The third is to learn to enter into silence, that space where the mind stops interfering. And the fourth is to act from the frequency you want to experience, even before seeing external results. Because reality responds less to what a person desires and more to what they embody every day. When this understanding is integrated, something changes. Fear loses strength. Anxiety stops directing every decision. And little by little, the feeling of being a victim of circumstances disappears. In its place, a different perception arises. That of consciously participating in the creation of your own experience. And perhaps that is the greatest revelation of all. That the purpose was never to find something outside, but to remember what was always inside.